I decided that I had to immerse myself in that. So I went down to the Amazon, where they have a most extraordinary brew called ayahuasca, which means the vine of souls, or the vine of the dead.
Right.
It's a mixture of two plants. It tastes absolutely horrendous. It is. You really have. Nobody should imagine that taking these plants is done for kicks. This is something that you absolutely have to brace yourself for it. You're going to vomit. You're going to have diarrhea. You're going to be very dizzy. But through it all, with these terrible difficulties that your body is going through, which really requires strength of will, through it all, you are plunged into an absolutely seamlessly convincing parallel world at the level of your consciousness. And you can absolutely understand how the notion of spirit worlds, even of heaven and hell, of supernatural beings, because these realms are inhabited, you can understand how it originated. And I've come to realize that there's a great mystery about human consciousness.
Right.
Any honest scientist will tell you this. Scientists do not understand what consciousness is or how it works. But it seems to me, and I draw this from now many years of experience with this strange Amazonian brew, that our consciousness normally in day-to-day life is tuned into a very narrow wavelength. This is the alert, problem-solving state of consciousness that's useful for us to survive in the hubbub of the modern world. But there are many other kinds of consciousness, and rather as we can retune a TV set to pick up many different signals, it's possible to retune the receiver wavelength of the brain in order to experience a much wider reality, normally invisible to our senses, that surrounds us. And it is this experience of exploring parallel worlds which I have found particularly intriguing and exciting about these shamanic plants, particularly so since people from many different cultures can explore the same worlds in altered states of consciousness. And normally when many people agree on what they've seen, then we accept that that's reality. And I think we have to consider that there is a kind of parallel reality here that we can only explore in altered states of consciousness.
Yeah, I totally agree with you.
I'd like to add a small disclaimer, if I could, that the Above Network LLC and the ATS Mix both are not advocating the use of illicit or illegal drugs. And I believe also, Graham, you also are not advocating people to take drugs.
I'm not advocating the use of drugs at all. One thing I do advocate, however, is adult responsibility.
Right.
And I do believe, as a matter of political principle, if you like, that adults in an advanced, developed society should be free to explore the mystery of their own consciousness, and that a society which seeks to legislate what we do and do not do with our own consciousness is in danger of invading the sovereignty of the individual in most horrific and unhelpful ways. We must be sovereign over our own consciousness.
And I just have one.
Going to talk about freedom.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I just have one thing to say about that before I toss it to Johnny, and that is there was a bunch of us in Vietnam that totally agreed with you.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes sense, One of the terrible hypocrisies of the West is that we talk constantly about freedom. When I say the West, I'm referring to Britain, the United States, the whole of the industrialized world, really.
Right.
We talk so much about freedom, and we wish to impose our model of freedom on other cultures, and yet within our own cultures, rooted and grounded in our own cultures, is the most grievous transgression of individual freedom, which is that my society may actually send me to prison for exploring with plants that have been in use in human culture for thousands of years the mystery of my own consciousness. This just cannot be right. If I'm not sovereign over my own consciousness, then I'm not sovereign over anything, and there's no point in talking about any kind of freedom, and let's forget about democracy as well.
Right.
Right. We talked briefly about the monuments that were found underneath the water there, 120 feet below the surface off the coast of Japan. I'm just curious, for there to be such a rise, a level of the ocean to rise, what type of cataclysmic event do you think might have happened for these to actually disappear and get submerged? Do you think global warming was had a part in it?
It's more complicated than that, although certainly it was a global warming of a form. The fact is that scientists don't really know why it happened, but there's universal agreement that it did happen, that there was an ice age, that for more than 120,000 years, most of North America and most of Northern Europe was lying under ice sheets that were 2 miles thick. I mean, you had 2-mile thick ice over New York State, and we had 2-mile thick ice over the city of London in England. And these vast ice caps were stable for more than 100,000 years. And then, round about 12,000 years ago, there was a ferocious meltdown, and sea level rose dramatically all around the world. And that was the end of the Ice Age. And after that, the world looked completely different. Britain was joined to mainland Europe at that time. It isn't anymore. You could walk from Siberia into Alaska. Taiwan was joined to the mainland of China. The world was a completely different place. And my argument is that archaeology cannot claim to have got to grips with the whole story of our past if it isn't prepared to look on those areas of land now underwater that were above water more than 12,000 years ago. And that takes diving, and that's why I learnt to scuba dive, and why I put myself through literally thousands of dives over 7 years all around the world, because nobody else is doing this work. And I'm one individual doing it on my own initiative. If there were properly funded institutes which were prepared to search for ruins underwater, they would find a whole lot more than I found.
All right, let's change horses just a second, and I want to talk briefly about the December 21st, 2012 scenario that we all have facing us coming up as a result of the Mayans. What do you think is going to happen, Graham, when that day comes? Is it going to be like the Y2K scenario where we're all going to be panicking and whatever and nothing happens, or do you think something's really legitimate about this?
I think there's something legitimate about it, but exactly what it's going to come to, nobody can really say. The Maya are not alone amongst ancient cultures in the world in viewing history in a certain way. That there was a period in the past when there was a golden age. That this golden age was brought to an end by a cataclysm. That mankind fell, rose up again, and was destroyed again by a cataclysm, fell back again to a primitive state, forgetting everything, became a species with amnesia, and then rose up again. And this view of history is found in ancient civilizations and cultures all around the world. It's a cyclical view of history rather than a direct, straight line. And it's a view that what goes around comes around, that there have been a sequence of cataclysms that strike the earth. And reduce civilization to rubble, so that we just have to start again. Plato, who passed down to us the myth of Atlantis, put it very nicely, that we have to begin again like children with no memory of what went before. And this is really what's of concern about the Mayan calendar, because the Mayan calendar marks a clear end date for civilization as we know it. And in doing so, it draws upon a vast fund of knowledge that lay behind the mysterious Mayan civilization of Central America. And that end date is the 21st of December, the winter solstice, 2012. And there are specific astronomical observations. I have to pay tribute to the work of John Major Jenkins in this respect, specific astronomical configurations that are going to take place on that date. The sun on the winter solstice will be rising against the background of the center of our galaxy, of the center of the Milky Way. And somehow, thousands of years ago, the Maya were able to calculate this forward in time and say to us, that is a signal that the world is coming to an end. And that signal is fast approaching, and we are in the period now when the Maya predicted the end of the world. Now, as I've mentioned, this was a remarkable civilization. They had superior astronomy. Their calendar, based on thousands of years of observation, was actually more accurate than the calendar that we use in Western culture today. And so when a culture like that says that some great cataclysm is going to strike the earth on a particular date, I think the least we should do is listen to them.